Enfolding Our Monstrous Children, a meditation on love and responsibility in the time of consequences. Cyborg writing is about the power to survive, not on the basis of original innocence, but on the basis of seizing the tools to mark the world that marked them as other. Donna Haraway. This is an ode to all the beings who don't yet know how to walk lightly on lands they did not emerge with, which, through no fault of their own, had no niche to receive them, who reproduce, unaware, in a simple repetition of their home hearth pattern, uprooted in a way that pushes out all the others and unintentionally leaves the land stripped down. It is also an ode to all those beings, human and other than, forced against their will to dwell in a place that was not their own. Indigenous people forced off their ancestral homelands and severed from the ways of their ancestors in ongoing genocides. Humans brutalized as chattel. Refugees, plantain, river carp. Here's to all those uprooted beings who've been in their new place so long they are part of the scenery, part of the web and rhythm of a place. Beings who've inhabited a land for 300, 500 years. Horses, Norway maple, European sparrows. To those created through the enclosing and domesticating efforts of colonizing humans, whose casual nuisance is an elbow to topple a game board, causing all the pieces to spray everywhere, like the Medford silk moth, like plastics or nuclear waste, post-industrial cities, pets, cyborgs, AI, algorithms. To those of us, for whatever reason, who never had a chance to grow up rooted in ancestral wisdom, held lovingly by a place we are rocked in the ancient rhythms of our lands and languages, and the unique cultural unfolding of a free people. What changes are we an ongoing part of? I identify with those plants growing through concrete, grown up crooked in the lack of light, with those invasives carried across the sea in satchels or tucked in the hem of some arriver's pant leg, from someone's homeland to sprout in unfamiliar soil, with those monstrous children who cannot control our own outcomes. I sometimes feel I was never meant to be here, on the soil I occupy, and I'm trying my best to thrive under a context I didn't mean to create, but I am a part of. And sometimes I feel almost good in that position, like a non-native nitrogen fixer who heralds a return of the forest, nestled in suburban landscapes. And sometimes I feel rather bad in that position, like the colonizers themselves, whose genocide we all dwell in the echoes of, the murderers of indigenous people, human and other than, and stealers of their lifeways. I don't mean to force the locals, like coyote and black bear, out to occupy lands of great dying, but here I am, complicit still, as are all beings that don't know how to walk lightly on the land they did not emerge with. I scream out for belonging, and the land screams out for participation, but we don't yet speak the same languages, have not had meaningful introductions, stare at each other across a chasm of trauma and violence. We are both so very wounded. I go barefoot, and we say hello in the light kiss of soil against soul. It comes to trust me as I leave the leaves season after season. Let wild things sprout, heal the soil, cultivate perennials. I move slowly over years. I give rot back to dust, and it bursts with life in response. And slowly, the land and her people, human and other than, share their secrets with me. I must learn the ways of my woodland neighbors. Are the beings here arrivers, colonizers, refugees? How do we honor ancestors who hold the deep time wisdom of place when everything is changing? We must all exist here together. How do we meet each other in the shadow of all we have been through, of all that we have done, and what our ancestors have done and been through? In all that trauma, we don't yet know how to be together. Can we grow? Can we thrive? can we become the wise ancestors to the future beings, as part of the earth, as one seething, thriving, diffracting entity. Look around and see that in the wake of colonial deforestation, the woods we have access to are often young and naive. They don't know the secrets of the old growth ways. They don't have the wisdom of their ancestors or elders to show them how. They're becoming places where the native and non-native strive together to find a way to thrive, to be the lush folding and tripping over of intergenerational thrumming, giving over power, making space organically, and letting go in vibrant cycles. Without wisdom and guidance, they often struggle, and they wrestle each other, and they are unsure of what to do, all while trying to navigate the environmental toxification laid down by humans. Our terms for this space of encounter are alienating towards that world which we have labeled as other. But it is really the same diffracting mattering that we are becoming and creating at the same time. How can we remediate something without opening our hearts to it? Do we want sustainability, to hold the line? Or do we want a deep sympoiesis, which enlivens mutual thriving, with a living pulse in responsibility to all? What does Marx have to say about the alienation of trees? It is from the perspective of the forest that I can more clearly see the structure of our communities, lurching together through the weight of systems perpetuated over time, interwoven with toxic environments and toxic social structures. We are struggling to become something together. Do you see how unified in structure and purpose our communities and these new woods are? How we are both fragile and struggling, wounded and broken, new and beautiful. I don't think this parallel is an accident. I think it's a holonic resonance. They need us as we need them. They need us to tend their emergent lifeways as they struggle to create healthy spots and lands of chemical sprays, fill, and non-native grasses. They need us to create biocultural technologies with their regenerative flows. And we need their gifts, skills, and wisdom to engage a climate dance where more of us collectively might survive and even come to thrive. This has always been the work of the people lovingly involved with the spirit of the land. Without this dedicated and responsible touch, grasses go extinct. The reproduction of trees becomes stunted. Fields of wild forage become fallow. All of this calling out for a decolonized ethic of reciprocal land-based care, one capable of working with an ever-shifting sand of an uncertain world. If we can go to the land and listen with our hearts to its needs, we can let it teach us how to be a part of the world's story. The earth is not, as it is often called in reductionist views, a dead rock. The earth is the emergent dreaming intelligence of the entangled ecology, which includes the extremophile bacteria, which have survived cataclysm after cataclysm to begin the organic project of complexity over and over and over again. The earth is the greatest scientist humankind has ever known. Its longitudinal experiments last eons. Its capacity to learn from mistakes and innovate on what mere mortals would consider failures is massive. If human greed and the myth of separation enacted in the obstruction, theft, hoarding, and misleveraging of ancestral power flows make the biosphere uninhabitable for human life and the ecology we emerged with, the Earth will go back to the bacterial drawing board and begin the life experiment again, selecting creatures perfectly adapted for the new conditions we create. You see this emergence already in the radioactive wolves of Chernobyl, plastic-eating bacteria and fungus, antibiotic-resistant microbes, pesticide-resistant insects, so-called superspecies like pislies and coilfs. These are the experiments that the Earth conducts in times of crisis, and the ones which have much to teach us about how to participate ethically in what new materialist Donna Haraway calls the Cthulhucene. Unlike the Anthropocene, a story of human supremacy, one where the fate of all species rests in our hands, the Cthulhucene understands we are embroiled in this mess with all the other beings. and the scales are no longer balanced just on our action and inaction, but on the intra-action of all things. With this new materialist turn, we understand we are co-becoming an entangled soup of increasing monsterhood and co-responsibility. In this soup, human creations, our material children, and their unforeseen externalities become monstrous under a social order which refuses to recognize them as ours and tend them lovingly with that holistic and decolonized ethic of care. By recognizing the responsibility to all the outcomes of historic, ongoing, and ancestral actions, we are able to soothe the relationships back into pattern, as family therapy might heal a rift between aging parents and their grown child, and to step into a future where we consider those outcomes before acting, and cannot take a single step without inviting in the whole thing, and all the beings an action might affect for ages to come. It matters what matters we use to think other matters with. It matters what stories we tell to tell other stories with. It matters what knots knot knots, what thoughts think thoughts, what descriptions describe descriptions, which ties tie ties. It matters what stories make worlds, what worlds make stories. Donna Haraway. They say there are no new stories, yet every story is new every time. Right now, the stories we are poised in are somehow familiar ones. The end of empire, social spectacle and fascism, bread and circuses, flood times of biblical proportions. We face the toxic outcomes of Western humanity's refusal to partner with a more comprehensive Earth story in the interdependent and squamous epoch of the Cthulhucene. In this time, we find ourselves beset by monsters of our own creation, who in turn co-create us. And together, we co-create near certain catastrophe. We stand embroiled in endless global war under ongoing and increasing climate collapse, food instability, and the ecocide of the sixth mass extinction. The increasing tide of refugees from each of these tribulations speaks to the tumultuous change times and the need to develop nimble, intelligent, adaptive systems which are open to understanding all the beings involved in and affected by a struggle. The fate of the human species is deeply embroiled with the fate of the rest of the ecosystem. It's not some miraculous capacity to change the inevitable, but our participatory capacity to partner with plants and animals, cities and ecosystems, to listen and become responsive to the earth, and most of all, to tend our own toxic outcomes until they can be soothed back into a more ethical pattern in the entangled web of Cthulian interbeing. We, the humans born and raised under the dominator monoculture, must become responsible to our own toxic outcomes in the way that tends them as we would our children. And, like parents realizing we have been abusive in the past, we must make amends, seek forgiveness, and do better going forward. We must come to these beings and help them find a place in the world, whether we repurpose them, restructure our relationship to them, or help them to learn how to die peaceful deaths that become fertile soil to new systems and ways of doing and making that are aligned with the Earth's story. This is how we write our way back into the dreaming Earth from the edge of extinction. Complex systems exist in a flux between states of surrender, giving over of form into the very fabric of relationship, and states of reconstitution whereby new systems come into being from the context established by the systems in surrender. This flux is most naturally experienced in the progression of seasonal processes, some subtle and seemingly perennial, others churning through a grand transmutation at the corners of the year, all shifting through cycles of deeper rhythms, always the bleeding edge of entropy and emergence in the dance of complexity. The unbecoming of a thing is just as essential to the processes and systems of the larger meshwork as the becoming of a thing. The more closely one attends to place, the more attuned one becomes to these rhythms, the more one is able to notice subtle shifts within larger shifts. More distinct seasons tend to emerge. Now, a time for growing and cautiously moving out into the world, sharing and spreading fecundity, becoming creation together, dancing at the edge of emergence, coming together to dream new configurations. Now, a time for ripening, nurturing the shared dreams into their fuller and more complex forms, ready to nourish the hungry heart inside, the seeds of the next generation. Now a time for dying back, giving over fully, surrendering into the soil what will be composted, and to find your way safely back into the earth before the cold of the next stage. Now a time for waiting, for drawing inward and dreaming, protecting yourself from any cold or harsh elements, and doing deep inner work so the next period of emergence can be all the more brilliant, bold, and beautiful. Tending to both death and birth, we are poised to learn how to become the doulas of a massive cultural transition, the ending of the old, the birthing of a new, in honor and responsibility to all.